Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm here again with a brand new story. Enjoy the story, and don't forget to share your valuable thoughts in the comments.
What if an entire American village disappeared in 1835, and the only clue left behind was a locked church no one dared to open for nearly 50 years? What if deep in the forests of New England there existed a settlement so isolated that when its people vanished, the outside world barely noticed until a traveling surveyor stumbled upon something no human being was meant to see? And what if the truth was never officially recorded because those who found it were too terrified to speak? In the autumn of 1835, far beyond the growing industrial towns of New England, hidden behind endless pine forests and narrow dirt roads, there stood a tiny settlement known as Ash Hollow. It was not marked on most official maps. Even local traders rarely visited it. The village consisted of no more than 30 wooden homes, a blacksmith shop, a schoolhouse, a general store, and at its center, a modest white church with a tall steeple visible above the trees. The people of Ash Hollow were known to nearby communities as deeply private. They farmed their own land, hunted deer in surrounding forests, and avoided unnecessary contact with outsiders. Some claimed the founders of the village had arrived decades earlier, after leaving Massachusetts following religious disputes. Others whispered that the town was built by families seeking to escape something far darker. In years, almost nothing unusual was reported. Then, in October of 1835, a merchant named Elias Turner left the neighboring town of Greenford with a wagon full of flour, salt, lamp oil, and winter supplies intended for Ash Hollow. He had made the trip several times before and knew the road well. He never returned. At first, no one was alarmed. Forest roads were dangerous, especially as winter approached. Wagons broke down, horses were injured, travelers sometimes stayed overnight unexpectedly. But after 6 days with no sign of Turner, concern began to grow. A small search party was organized. Led by Nathaniel Brooks, 5 men followed the northern trade path toward Ash Hollow. The journey took nearly 2 days through thick woodland, muddy crossings, and rocky hills. When they finally reached the village, what they found would become one of the strangest local accounts ever whispered through rural New England. Ash Hollow was completely silent. Not abandoned in the ordinary sense, silent in a way that felt unnatural. Smoke no longer rose from chimneys, yet many fireplaces inside homes still contained ash and half-burned wood. Tables were set for meals. Doors stood partially open. A loaf of bread sat hardened on one kitchen counter beside a knife. Children's toys remained scattered across bedroom floors. Beds were unmade. Lanterns sat extinguished beside chairs, as though their owners intended to relight them hours later. But there were no people, no bodies, no signs of struggle, no blood, no broken furniture, no evidence of robbery. Even stranger, livestock remained in fenced enclosures. Chickens wandered freely. A cow was found still tied in one barn, weak from dehydration. It appeared as though the entire population had vanished suddenly and all at once. Constable Brooks later wrote in his personal journal, "It was as if life itself had been interrupted in the middle of a sentence." The men searched every structure. The schoolhouse was empty. The general store remained stocked. The blacksmith's tools were still warm enough to suggest recent use, though how recent could not be determined. Only one building remained inaccessible. the church. Its large wooden doors were locked from the outside with an iron chain wrapped tightly through both handles. No villager had mentioned this practice before. The windows had been boarded from within. A strange symbol had been carved above the entrance, partially scratched away as though someone had attempted to destroy it. Brooks ordered the doors forced open. The men hesitated. According to later accounts, even standing near the church produced an overwhelming feeling of dread. One searcher reportedly refused to approach closer than 20 feet. But eventually, with crowbars and axes, they broke the chain and forced the doors inward. Inside, the air was stale and freezing cold. Rows of wooden pews faced an altar covered with a thick layer of dust, far more dust than should have been possible if the building had been used recently. Yet the strangest discovery lay beneath the altar, a trap door, hidden beneath a faded rug. Its iron handle was rusted, but the wood surrounding it showed fresh scratches. The men opened it. Below was a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Only Brooks and 2 others were willing to continue. Carrying oil lanterns, they descended into a small underground chamber carved crudely from stone and packed earth. What they discovered was never officially documented, but Brooks' surviving journal pages, recovered decades later by his grandson, describe enough to explain why the story endured. Inside the chamber were 12 wooden chairs arranged in a circle. Each chair faced inward. In the center stood a stone basin blackened by soot and wax residue. Around the room's walls were shelves holding dozens of handwritten journals, many damaged by moisture. Symbols covered the stone walls, circles, intersecting lines, unfamiliar letters, and repeated markings resembling eyes. And in the far corner, 12 pairs of shoes, adult and child-sized, carefully lined up side by side. Nothing else. No bodies, no clothing, no explanation. Brooks ordered the chamber sealed immediately. He later claimed the journals contained writings too disturbing to release publicly. Several pages reportedly described recurring dreams shared by multiple villagers. Dreams involving a voice beneath the earth. A voice that promised protection from illness, famine, and death in exchange for obedience. At first, these writings were dismissed as religious mania, but later entries became far stranger. One passage allegedly read, "We were told the crossing would happen before winter. We must leave behind what is earthly. We must arrive prepared." Another stated, "The children hear it most clearly now." No one could explain the meaning. Brooks and his men returned to Greenford, shaken and deeply unsettled. Officially, the event was described as a mass relocation under unknown circumstances. The public was told villagers likely fled due to disease fears or food shortages. Yet this explanation satisfied no one. Why leave food, livestock, tools, and belongings? Why lock the church from the outside? Why conceal an underground chamber? And most importantly, where did dozens of people go? Winter snowfall soon covered the region, ending further investigation. Over time, Ash Hollow became local folklore. Travelers avoided the road. Hunters refused to camp nearby. Some claimed distant lights could occasionally be seen, moving between abandoned homes. Others reported hearing bells ringing from the church, despite the structure being empty. By 1842, the village had largely collapsed into ruin. Trees overtook roads, roofs caved inward, nature slowly reclaimed everything. Then, in 1887, nearly 52 years after the disappearance, a railroad expansion survey brought workers unexpectedly close to the former settlement. Among them was engineer Samuel Hodge, who documented the site in a private notebook. Unlike earlier visitors, Hodge entered the ruined church again. The underground chamber had partially collapsed. Most shelves were destroyed, but one journal remained preserved inside a sealed tin box. Hodge kept it. That journal later surfaced at an estate auction in Vermont in 1911, before disappearing again into private hands. Only fragments had been copied. These fragments intensified the mystery. One entry described villagers hearing sounds beneath floorboards at night. Not scratching, not movement, whispering. Another described livestock refusing to enter certain fields, dogs barking at empty corners, children drawing identical circular symbols despite never being taught them. The final legible entry was dated October 18, 1835, just days before the disappearance. It read, "Tomorrow the doors will be sealed. We have been instructed to gather below after sundown. Some remain fearful, but hesitation is no longer possible. The promise has already been made." After that, nothing. No names, no signatures, no further records. Modern historians debate whether Ash Hollow truly existed as described, or whether accounts became exaggerated through decades of retelling. No federal archive contains official mention of the village. No census records clearly identify it. No church registration survives. Skeptics argue the story is likely a combination of multiple real abandoned settlements merged into legend. Yet several details remain difficult to dismiss. Brooks's journal was real. Surveyor maps from the 1830s reference an unnamed settlement in the approximate region, and local oral traditions in parts of rural Vermont and New Hampshire still mention a vanished, hollow town whose people went below rather than face winter. Some paranormal researchers interpret the story as evidence of a cult. Others suggest mass psychosis, secret religious ritual, or coordinated migration. A few propose a far stranger theory, that the villagers genuinely believed they were preparing for some form of transformation or passage, not death, not escape, arrival. Whatever happened in Ash Hollow in 1835 remains unsolved. No bodies were ever recovered, no descendants ever came forward, no confirmed explanation was recorded. Only abandoned homes, a sealed church, an underground chamber, and one final written promise: we leave together or not at all. Even today, if you travel through forgotten corners of old New England, older locals may still warn against wandering too far off marked roads after sunset. Not because of wild animals, not because of getting lost, but because, as one 19th century account allegedly warned, some places are not empty, they are waiting. And perhaps, somewhere beneath the forests of old America, the unanswered secret of Ash Hollow remains buried exactly where it began.
What if the mystery of Ash Hollow did not end with the village's disappearance, but was only the beginning of something far more disturbing? What if decades after the people vanished, others began arriving there, drawn by curiosity, greed, or disbelief, and some of them never came back either? Because according to scattered local records, the abandoned village was not completely forgotten. It was avoided, and there is a difference. Following the strange discoveries of 1835, authorities in nearby communities quietly discouraged travel toward the northern forest road leading to Ash Hollow. No official warning signs existed, but locals understood the message: stay away. For years, this unwritten rule was followed, but fear fades faster than facts. By the 1840s, younger men began challenging the old stories. To them, Ash Hollow was merely an abandoned settlement wrapped in superstition. Some believed valuables had been left behind: silverware, tools, hidden savings, or religious artifacts. In 1847, 3 brothers from a nearby farming family reportedly traveled there with a mule cart. Their names were listed in a church ledger as Thomas, Caleb, and Edwin Mercer. According to family accounts, they intended to salvage lumber and metal fixtures from deserted homes. They left before sunrise. Only one returned. 2 days later, Edwin Mercer walked back into Greenford alone. Witnesses described him as pale, trembling, and unable to maintain eye contact. His clothes were muddy, his boots were missing, his hands were covered in shallow cuts as though he had clawed through thorn bushes or rough stone. When asked where his brothers were, Edwin gave only one response: they stayed. No further explanation. His family pressed him for answers. So did local officials, but Edwin refused to say anything else. Within weeks, neighbors reported dramatic changes in his behavior. He no longer attended church. He boarded up the windows of his room from inside. He refused to sleep at night, instead pacing until sunrise. Most disturbingly, he began drawing. Dozens of pages, circles, interlocking lines, symbols almost identical to those reportedly found beneath Ash Hollow Church. His mother burned many of them, fearing madness. Edwin Mercer died less than 6 months later from what local doctors called nervous collapse, though such diagnoses were common placeholders in that era for conditions poorly understood. After his death, one final notebook was discovered hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Its pages contained fragmented sentences written in increasingly unstable handwriting. Most were unreadable, but one line was repeatedly written across multiple pages: "Do not follow the sound below." This reignited fear surrounding Ash Hollow. The Mercer incident spread quickly across surrounding counties. The abandoned village was no longer seen as simply eerie. Now it was considered dangerous. Still, human curiosity remained stronger than caution. In 1859, a traveling journalist named Benjamin Cole arrived in Vermont, researching regional folklore for a Boston publication. Cole was skeptical by nature and known for publicly mocking ghost stories and frontier superstitions. When told of Ash Hollow, he reportedly laughed and declared, "If a town can vanish into thin air, I shall be the first to report how." He left with notebooks, provisions, and a revolver. Unlike previous visitors, Cole documented his journey extensively. Several letters he mailed during the trip survived. The first was lighthearted. He described forest trails, poor weather, and amusing local paranoia. The second was different. Its tone shifted noticeably. In a letter dated November 4th, 1859, Cole wrote, "The place exists, though I confess it is stranger than described. The homes remain in ruin, but certain details trouble me greatly. I cannot explain why some doors appear recently disturbed." Recently disturbed. This was decades after abandonment. His next letter never arrived. Instead, weeks later, a postal rider discovered one torn notebook page snagged beneath brush along a forest trail. It contained only a partial paragraph. "Something in the church is no longer sealed. I believed at first it was animal intrusion, but now I am no longer certain.
there are sounds during the night that resemble neither wind nor wildlife. It is not possible that—" The sentence ended there. Benjamin Cole was never seen again. No remains were recovered, no belongings found, not even his horse. At this point, the legend crossed from local curiosity into regional obsession. Ash Hollow became the subject of newspaper rumors, campfire tales, and increasingly dramatic retellings. Some exaggerated details beyond recognition. Others insisted the truth was worse than fiction. One former woodsman claimed he camped 2 miles from the village in 1868 and awoke to church bells ringing at exactly 3:17 a.m. He swore there was no wind.
No weather, no visible movement. Yet the sound continued for nearly 4 minutes. He left immediately and never returned. Another account came from railroad laborers in the 1880s. While surveying land nearby, workers reportedly discovered a narrow depression in the forest floor not shown on maps. It resembled a collapsed tunnel entrance. When they began digging, foreman orders abruptly stopped the excavation. No explanation was recorded. Rumors spread that beneath Ash Hollow lay a network of underground passages extending beyond the church chamber. This theory gave rise to new speculation. Perhaps the villagers never disappeared at all. Perhaps they relocated underground. Absurd as it sounded, supporters pointed to several facts. No tracks leading away from the village had ever been found. No wagons were missing. No evidence suggested a coordinated overland migration, and multiple accounts referenced unusual subterranean features. Could there have been tunnels, storage chambers, natural cave systems, or something else entirely? No formal excavation was ever completed. In fact, by the late 19th century, local governments appeared unusually uninterested in investigating further. One county archive reportedly contained missing pages from land ownership records related to the Ash Hollow region. A historian reviewing them in 1923 noted that several entries had been physically cut from ledgers using a blade, not torn, removed. Why erase records of an already abandoned settlement? No answer exists. Then came the most unsettling modern account. In 1934, during the Great Depression, a photographer named Margaret Hale traveled through northern New England documenting abandoned rural communities. Her portfolio included mills, collapsed barns, forgotten cemeteries, and deserted farmhouses. She also photographed Ash Hollow. Several of her images survive. At first glance, they show exactly what one would expect: ruined cabins, overgrown roads, broken fences, the collapsed church tower. But one photograph drew particular attention decades later. It was a wide shot of the church exterior taken at dusk. When enlarged in the 1970s during archival restoration, researchers noticed something unusual in an upper window: a face. Not clearly enough to identify, but unmistakably human in outline. Pale, watching. Margaret Hale insisted no one accompanied her during the shoot. She also claimed the upper level had already collapsed and inaccessible. Skeptics argued it was damage, shadow, or lens artifact. Perhaps, but Hale herself reportedly refused to discuss the photograph after developing it. She never returned to the site. By the mid-20th century, Ash Hollow had transformed fully from obscure regional mystery into American folklore. Books referenced it briefly. Paranormal enthusiasts hunted for its location.
Many failed to find it. Some argued this proved the story was fabricated. Others believed the exact location had been deliberately obscured. Even today, maps vary, coordinates conflict. Roads once leading north have vanished beneath modern forest growth. Satellite enthusiasts occasionally claim to identify foundation outlines hidden beneath trees, though none are verified. And so the mystery remains suspended between fact and legend. A vanished village, a locked church, an underground chamber, missing investigators, symbols repeated across generations, and a place so unsettling that even after nearly 2 centuries, no one has provided a final explanation. Was Ash Hollow a secret religious commune overtaken by paranoia? A cult preparing for ritual disappearance? A hidden cave collapse concealing an accidental mass burial? Or something stranger, something impossible to fit neatly inside history books? No one knows. But perhaps the most chilling detail is not what happened in 1835. It is that people kept going back, and some never returned, which suggests one haunting possibility. Ash Hollow was never simply abandoned. Something there kept calling people back, as though whatever began beneath that church was never truly finished.